Just be ready for the hook when I get to time. All right. Well, first of all, good morning. And I want to thank our guests for coming from the first State of the Union to give us some insight into how you all have been implementing community benefit agreements. I come at this from a particular perspective, not only as a public sector employee for the great city of New Orleans, but also as a ULI member that has chaired the Public-Private Partnership Council for several years. And I want to say more than 10 years ago, I was a contributing author to ULI's paper on the 10 best practices for public-private partnership. And it has been fascinating to see the evolution of that engagement, particularly over the last decade. And back when that paper was put together, community benefit agreements were really nowhere on the radar. I think it's very much as David described at the beginning of our session, that they tended to be more bilateral conversations between government and developers. And one of the things that I think has emerged over years of implementation is that both of those parties have learned that they really do not know what is best for the community just through those bilateral discussions. So we've had a chance to actually look at our best intentions around public-private partnership conversations fall short of the mark of what benefits we thought the community might inure from those discussions. So the fact that the communities across the nation and cities have taken a more proactive engagement in making sure that major developments bring the kind of benefits that they truly need, that they're on the ground to see and recognize, I think is a marked improvement in this whole discussion of urban revitalization and investment with a community benefit primarily in mind. It's also interesting to note from the discussions that awareness is a key element in terms of the success of a community's participation in this type of opportunity. The Staples Center in Los Angeles has been mentioned as one of the flagship examples, prototypes. In many cities across the country and communities where they are engaged in CBAs, they will talk to City of Los Angeles and to the parties that were involved in that project to gain guidance. But I think it's also important to know that that CBA really came out of some great disappointment in the stadium's first construction, the first phase of it, and the fact that so many of the oral commitments that were made by the developer didn't really come to pass. So it was one of those situations where it was, fool me once, shame on you. And the community organized after knowing that there was going to be a next phase of development to make sure that the kind of benefits that they had first been promised around phase one, and also that had evolved since that first phase of construction, were going to be consummated in a formal agreement between the community and the developer. And as a result, that has been one of the best examples nationally to look at in terms of the benefits that were provided. Affordable housing being one of the primary benefits coming out of those discussions, but even allowing for improved parking in the area, both around events and for the residents in the community. And one of the things that I think is important to bear in mind too with the CBA is that because it is a discussion, a negotiation between developer and the community, you have much wider latitude to gain benefits than we do as a city and with the developer. We're constrained by all sorts of restrictions of law and of ethics, really, to keep the conversations within a pretty tight lane when we're talking with developers. But as a community, whatever it is you feel you can bring to the table that will be a benefit that the developer might provide, it's fair game. You can have the discussion. But again, it is a negotiation. I think the most innovative outcome of a CBA that I'm aware of was the Atlantic Yards in Brooklyn, where as a part of the conversation, they actually got basketball tickets. I'm not sure how that happened, but, and I still need to find out whether we're talking about the Knicks or whether we're talking about one of the college teams, but it really is amazing the innovation with which communities have pursued the benefits. But normally it is about very basic knitting. It's making sure that two things happen. One is that the adverse impacts of a development are mitigated, and I think the example that we saw this morning is a beautiful case study of showing both the perceived and real impacts of a development being addressed to a community's satisfaction, but also sometimes expanding the mission of the development beyond what the initial idea or concept was. So again, if it's a major development that involves housing, look at whether or not there is an opportunity for affordable housing or for meeting other housing needs within the community. If it's helping with a tipping point in terms of population within a community, maybe that grocery store or other retail, community-based retail that was in the works or hoped for by the community for a long period of time might be realized through this development. There's a real chance here through CBAs to look at what the community needs and see how this developer might be able to provide it. As far as negotiations, again, this is from my observation of different case studies across the country with CBAs, I think the community is in its best negotiating position when two conditions exist. One is that there is a real, what the economists call inelastic interest on the part of the developer to get that project going. In other words, for whatever reasons, apart from the community's interest, that developer wants to see that project go there. The market may be great in terms of the geographic location. They may be responding to a state or federal or local mandate. There may be any number of reasons why this project's got to go here at this time. That's a great opportunity for the community to look that developer straight in the eye and say, okay, we know we've got you here in terms of you needing to be here in this place. The other is if the development does require some sort of review or entitlement adjustment, and as the council member stated, zoning is often an opportunity for the community to work around its support for a project to get the benefits that it would like. But again, think very expansively, particularly in a city like New Orleans. We have subdivision cases, we have historic preservation cases, we have a whole range of cases where projects may need to come before a commission or council for consideration that open the door for community to have very earnest conversations with developers. We have a case right now coming up, which many of you know about, I'm sure, that if it were not for the subdivision opportunity to engage in a conversation, we would not be able to get certain benefits out of that discussion. Again, that's been primarily between the city and the developers of that project, but again, the opportunity to sit with someone, to sit with the developer, is enhanced greatly if that developer needs to have a subdivision, historic preservation, or zoning hearing held. I think it's also fascinating to look at the history of CBAs over the last 10 years as mechanisms to heal old wounds in communities. Columbia University in New York and Harlem have not had what I'd say was the easiest relationship over the last 20, 25 years. And one of the things that got them off to a pretty rocky footing was a project done back in the 60s and 70s that included a parking deck expansion. And just the whole orientation of that project and building left the citizens of Harlem feeling literally like they were getting the back door of the university. Since that time, people have gotten very sophisticated. Columbia's had to do some major expansion. And in the part of Manhattan called Manhattanville, in fact, West Harlem, there's a major project, about $6 billion worth of investment when it's all put together, where Columbia University is trying to get more competitive with some of their Ivy League brothers and sisters in terms of campus design and also meeting some of the real needs they have for expansion. But that has been a project where the citizens of Harlem have engaged quite directly in community benefit agreements, including a university-sponsored school, again, affordable housing, making sure that hires are made within living wage, and also looking for minority and local hires as far as first rights go with employment at the institution coming out of this expansion. So again, it's good to look at the relationship historically that you've had with institutions that are in the community that are looking to expand. I think for New Orleans, clearly we've got a major investment happening in our medical district, both with the University Medical Center and Veterans Administration. One of the great hopes that we have is that this investment, like many others in different cities, Philadelphia, Boston, Seattle, where they've had major economic benefits from medical districts in particular, that like those cities will be able to really leverage the investment of those two medical centers with other private investment that will want to co-locate or be close to those institutions. There's also the opportunity for great employment of a range of different classification, both high skill and medium skills, to benefit from the investment of UMC and Veterans Administration. And community benefit agreements should be a part of the conversation there as to how we're able to leverage that project in the whole Geno Bed district to its greatest opportunity and outcome for the city of New Orleans. But we need to be looking across the city. Wherever we have major investments, certainly those that, again, have to be where they are. We have a lot of interest coming in the city now around retail. We need to look at those opportunities in terms of leveraging, again, benefits for the community. But it's most critical to stay involved and stay engaged. I think if there's one other thing that I heard this morning, just about being on the same playing field as the developer. They do know what they're after when they come to the table. They do know the project that they're looking to implement. But since the city has gone through such extensive planning exercises post-Katrina, most of the communities, particularly through the neighborhood associations in New Orleans, have a pretty good read on what's going on in their own backyard too. Use that to your advantage. Make sure that you stay abreast with the Planning Commission in terms of work that they're doing. Make sure you stay up on the cases that are coming up through their agendas. And again, not just zoning, but subdivision, HDLC cases, et cetera, to see where projects may be happening that both impact your community, but give an opportunity perhaps for some CBA discussions. Usually by the time it hits an agenda, most of your great window of opportunity has passed. So that's a reason even more to stay in touch with your Planning Commission as it relates to your neighborhood plans. Always stay up with what's going on with those. Look at opportunities as you engage in the plan updates to see where economic development may occur, both neighborhood-based and perhaps even citywide or regional-based opportunities for your community to house major projects. And when those projects come online, then look for the opportunity to engage with the CBA. Also stay in touch with my office, with the Office of Place-Based Design and Development, and make sure that we are keeping the pipeline open in terms of opportunities for you to discuss CBAs as well. A lot of private developers come to City Hall looking for benefits and assistance, whether it's sidewalk improvements or waiver of permit fees or any number of benefits that they feel may help their projects pencil out better. And we need to know what the community's interests are. You are the best carriers of that message. And certainly if we can turn the developer to engage CBAs while the plans are still on the drawing board, then we have the greatest chance for the most positive outcome for the community. There are loads of case studies out there to look at, and I certainly would encourage anyone who's interested in being at the forefront of bringing CBAs to New Orleans to take a look at those. Some are more successful than others, but all of them are instructive and educational. I really want to thank our guests again this morning for bringing 3 different perspectives of how CBAs work, both from the community, from the private development interest, and also from the city's benefit. Although the city really should not be a direct partner at the negotiating table in these discussions, we clearly have an interest in their outcome. And I would also think that if there are certain terms and conditions that the community and the developer meet, where the city has to be a player, that in order to make this thing happen, this school come online, or this neighborhood grocery happen, or the employment opportunities to really take off as they should, the city has to do this. That then we need to be brought in real time in those discussions as well to make sure that we're leveraging all 3 parties' opportunity to make the city the best place it can be. I really am glad that ULI is taking a leadership role in having this conversation and convening it. I think because New Orleans is really looking at this approach with such fresh eyes, it's going to be important for us to continue this discussion and again see through our own case studies how we can improve the practice of CBAs and use it as a critical tool in helping to advance our city to its very great future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. We appreciate those comments. Bill mentioned case studies of community benefit agreements. Our office, with the assistance of Dan LaSalle at the Public Law Center, has prepared a summary and index of CBAs drawn from a number of national databases. We had a couple of demonstration copies outside. We're going to post that document on the Public Law Center website. It has links, so if you want to find out more about the Atlantic Yards CBA, you'll be able to read a brief summary of it, click on the link, and actually look at the document and some of the supporting literature. Okay, I want now to bring to the lectern Keisha Brown Robinson with the Central City Renaissance Alliance. I was blasting through the preparation of the agenda and I typed it wrong, the Crescent City Alliance, but pretty soon they'll be citywide, not just Central City.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
I have friends out here. We Central City.
Well, Keisha and her colleague Sandra Reed and I were knee-deep 3 or 4 years ago in what turned out, regrettably, to be a failed CBA negotiation. But I know from that we all learned, and so we ask you, Keisha, for your thoughts about this morning's comments.